Know your business instead of know your customer.
All right, might be the one of the first ones to adopt that. I like that for sure. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's just a random peeve of mine because there's so much regulation around KYC and everything. And in my opinion, the vast majority of risk and fraud and scams doesn't come from the end consumer. It comes from people behind teams. And I think a
Yep.
definitive delineation of terms is due there.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of interesting arguments around KYC. Like, is it effective? How should you do it? Should people be liable to release your information to the public or to authorities or both? And there's so many intricate things that go into it, but when we roll out with that, we're going to be coming out with something that's super unique. It's a little different. I don't know if I quite want to say exactly how that's going to look, but it's not going to be your traditional, like, you're trusting us to hold your identity on file and we're going to report it to the authorities if anything were to happen. Like, it's going to be a little bit different and I think, in my opinion, a lot more legit and, like, even from a legal perspective. So we'll have more information on that later, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about it. I mean, that's part of what we're wanting to do with Gauss. We want to build ourselves as the gold standard of vetting within the blockchain space. And hopefully others, take what we're doing and apply it, which isn't easy across the, decentralized DeFi space.
Yeah, for sure. But actually, speaking of Goss, I think we're good to go. So if you want to just introduce yourself and tell us kind of like the baseline of what Goss is and what you're trying to accomplish, and then I can kind of dive into more of the nitty gritty questions from there.
Yeah, sure. So Gauss, we're building a curated layer one ecosystem. We're gearing a lot of it toward marketing for brands and games and stuff like that. But that's because I view, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, I view marketing uh, as sort of it'll be like gaming. We're going to end up launching quarter 4 this year with our blockchain, native swap, NFT marketplace, and Explorer, and then continuing to build from there. So that's a nutshell.
All right, gotcha. So do you have any brands that you're currently working with or are in the talks of working with, or anybody that's like expressed interest in this is something that we really want to do? Like, obviously a chain that vets all the projects that comes onto it. That is or would be pretty appealing to me if I was, running a multi-billion-dollar business. I wouldn't want my audience to obviously go on to Pancake Swap and like find a rug pull token or something.
Right, which happens literally every day.
Yep.
Short answer is yes. Uh, However, we're not publicly disclosing anyone that I have talked to or that we've talked to, or that we're wanting to target. Our go to market strategy is going to lean very heavily on my background in the event and entertainment industry. Um, I have a lot of connections with large events, artists of all scales. So I expect quarter 1, we should be able to announce some marquee partners. But it's challenging, right? I wish I could publicly say, yeah, we have this artist that I've spoken to or this artist that I have to, but those deals aren't inked. And for the bigger ones, they want to see the ecosystem up and running. They want to see some smaller things launch with us first. They have very large brands that they can't just we're going to ape in with this new project. I get it. So it's challenging for us, that question. We get asked it a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, proof of concept is definitely key for a lot of big players, right? Like, it's not worth the risk of trying something new with the reward being like essentially adding another product to their whole line if they already have this massive reputation built up that could be hindered based off of something not going correct with the whole ecosystem that they would be integrating with. And I suppose
Right.
that proof of concept is really key for those huge businesses. But for a
Yeah.
smaller creator that has a lot more like upside potential to benefit from it, that would 100% be something that they'd go for.
Right. Somebody that I can say I haven't talked to yet, I do have a connection to their team, but Mr. Beast is a good example of this. He worked with a project, it went south. He took a lot of flack for it. I think more and more brands are going to be cautious, when looking to get in a space, which again is why I think we're so perfectly positioned.
Creating your own space, essentially. Yeah,
Right.
I like it. No, I think that's definitely great. So I guess this kind of already is like partially answered, but why go through the hassle of creating your own entire blockchain rather than utilizing like a token ecosystem through your own, like say a DEX that you would have to vet the projects before they're allowed on that DEX, rather than creating your entire blockchain to vet projects on?
Because we have bigger plans in the 3, 5, and 10-year roadmap, that being on somebody else's layer 1 or layer 2 would be overly restrictive for what we want to do and what we want to build. Because,
Anything?
go ahead.
I was gonna say, anything you can give us a little sneak peek on?
Yeah, we were actually just having a great chat in our Discord about this for the last hour or so, about the NFT protocols that we're going to be developing, how I want them to work, and what the future of that looks like, right? Right now, we're seeing lots and lots and lots of PFP NFTs or very shitty blockchain games. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is, right? Every evolution has a start, and we're in like the Pong era of blockchain gaming. So in the future, I think that most of the transactions you see in games, like picture World of Warcraft or whatever, your loot drops, your mining, resource gathering, crafting, all of those things could be done on chain. I also think that in the future, and this is well in the future because it's going to take a significant amount of dev time to get there. But I think a lot of that can also be done with AI generative assets. So not all crafting recipes would be defined, for example. You'd have a lot of randomness in that sort of system. And that's where I think the metaverse will end up being. In order to have cross game assets, cross environment assets, and the ability for players and users to hop between worlds and environments. It's going to take a lot of this sort of development in the individual bricks, and that's part of what we want to do. And doing that on Gauss will be orders of magnitude easier for us than if we were trying to shoehorn some results into somebody else's ecosystem. And in the future, just as a caveat, I do want to also port them over as EIPs for Ethereum, because we are going to be EVM compatible. And I think that Ethereum will be around for a good long time as potentially the backbone. Like EVM compatibility will tie in a lot of chains. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that definitely makes sense. I don't know like how easy it is to change different like functionalities or different features on a blockchain itself. I mean, I obviously don't run a blockchain, so I suppose I wouldn't be the best one to like know that. But yeah, it definitely makes sense. And we had one question in chat that's really relevant to what we're on now. Dry Responsibility 42 asks, why do a layer 1 chain versus a layer 2 on Ethereum or another, for example?
Yeah, I mean, basically that whole explanation I just gave, we don't want to be restricted to any other chain with what we're building. And there's pros and cons to everything, right? Being centralized, decentralized, everything has pros and cons. But being what we are with Gauss, a more centralized blockchain, we're going to be able to more rapidly develop and evolve than decentralized chains. I'm a fan of Ethereum. I think you have to be if you're in this space. But I think it would also be naive not to recognize that they've been working on ETH 2.0 for 5 years now. Whereas if that were a centralized team or company, they could out 3 years ago or better. Um, so that's a big chunk of the reason why. The ability to build and grow as we need to.
Gotcha. Yeah. I
I
mean,
have Austin here, by the way. Sorry. And Lauren's here. So they both tuned in from
oh,
elsewhere.
awesome. Glad to have you guys in the audience. Let's see. I was gonna ask a question that totally just slipped my mind. But
Sorry.
in the meantime, you're good. But in the meantime, we had another question from Ben Jonathan. He asks, "Your project seems to have an interesting name. Does it have a story behind it? And if so, could you share the story?"
Yeah, there's a couple parts to this. Originally, I wanted to just call it Gang, right? There was a morning where I decided on that name. I called up Austin. I think it was that day. Super excited about the name for a reason I'll be able to disclose publicly at a later point. And then after some initial, like we were building the team and then some initial feedback from others, um, we decided that it needed to be more than just that. Um, Austin, I believe it was, actually came up with including Gauss. Might have been Lauren. It was Austin or Lauren that proposed Gauss. It had to have been Austin. Anyway, we're all nerds. We all have a lot of interest in STEM. And so Gauss kind of embodied the idea, the magnetism of building a community and network effects and things like that. That's when we were doing our logo, that's what we were going for. So that's kind of the thing there.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. But yeah, I mean, if you're gonna be running a blockchain that a bunch of people utilize, then I'm glad that you guys are nerds. Because if it was anybody else,
Well, I mean, it,
then
you know, I think not everyone has to be fully technical. I think Austin also answered somebody's question in our Discord at one point because I don't have a quote unquote technical background on my, LinkedIn page. But I've also been programming on and off since the 90s, I've just never done it professionally. I would only still call myself a hobbyist, and Austin is significantly better than I am, like leagues beyond, because that's his, core area of focus there. And I think it's important to have specialists in a lot of areas, but I think also being a generalist and semi-technical co-founder on this team who has started numerous other businesses. I mean, I started my first business at 12. So I have experience in all of that. It is important to have technical people, but I think having a diverse team is also important.
oh yeah, 100%. And I remember you guys having, I think it was a chief financial officer. I remember hearing in an AMA,
Mm-hmm.
somebody asked like why you had some specific team member, and you kind of went into a whole spiel about how having a diverse team is super important, especially at scale. Um, do you have any thoughts around that? Maybe that weren't necessarily covered, or even like kind of like the TLDR of that conversation? Because I thought that was super important. So if anybody's listening here that didn't get to hear that part of it, I think that's pretty
Yeah.
important.
So Pat is our CFO. And I brought him up because somebody said something about lacking experience. Pat's been a C-suite executive for 3 decades. So generally CFO or whatnot. He's worked with multi-billion dollar companies and he, made the conscious decision to come on board this endeavor to work with us and to work with me at the helm of this endeavor, which I think also speaks to my ability. Everyone doesn't know me, but everyone on our team has known me for more than a decade and has worked with me in various capacities. So I think having, an engineer willing to follow, Lauren's a scientist, Pat's a 3 decades long C-suite exec. I think that speaks to the diversity of our team and like their faith in me to lead this.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was actually just listening to a podcast the other day, and it was of some guy that runs tens or hundreds of $1 million worth companies like revenue every year, and he said you eventually get to a point where you don't hire a team, you assemble a team. You don't hire out a business, you assemble the business through picking the team members by hand because you know that they fit the role that they need to play. And I feel like, obviously since everybody on the team has known you for like a decade, I feel like that is exactly what you've done. And I really love that approach. And I think that really sets you up for success because you've really handpicked your whole team. And it's like you got a super team essentially compared to other guys where it's just like three college buddies getting together to create the next Titano fork or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like not to knock any other team because a lot of them do just randomly come together and make some great things. But I think in being able to handpick this team, to roles both now and in the future, because Pat's role right now is very minimal. But in the future, in raising millions, working with billions of dollars, you want that level of financial head, right? You don't want somebody who's, no offense to anyone, but you don't want a 19-year-old going through college to be your CFO, in my opinion, at that scale. So yeah, I'm really, really happy with the team that we were able to assemble and that everyone agreed to follow me on this, insane journey because we've been at this for more than a year to get to this point,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really just love that approach, like handpicking a team. But yeah, a little bit move of a topic. Triton asks, what other functionalities do you hope to integrate with NFTs in the future? Have you thought about integrating with another team of devs trying to develop a network? I guess this would also be a good time to transition into the Ferro card NFTs and what exactly they do and the utility with them.
Yeah, so I will answer the first part first, then get into Ferro cards. We will be interested in working with others in the future. I don't know about others across a network yet, but there are some interesting teams and projects out there developing some things with NFTs and other tech for blockchains that we're interested in pursuing. So those relationships would make sense once we're ready. However, at this current time, they're more established than we are. We still need to get to the point where we can launch before we really begin building those sort of outside relationships on the underlying technology side of things. Ferro cards, they're going to be our membership NFT for the Gauss ecosystem. I don't like the term membership, and I need to come up with a better one. Because if you don't have one, it's not like you're, exiled from the Gauss ecosystem. It is our way to work around current regulations and laws to fundraise. You can't do a token sale right now before an ecosystem is launched in the United States, or you are launching a security token. That's the way the SEC sees it. So functionally, you can't sell arcade tokens unless you have a working arcade machine. So this allows us to raise money with these NFTs, give an allocation of our native token to these holders once we launch, as well as a ton of future rewards. Because I really want to pump a lot of value into them over the long term. As we have partners launch with us, we'll be able to take a portion of their token, airdrop it to everyone that holds these NFTs. We could do whitelist spots for future partner brand NFTs. We do free NFTs from partners and brands. There's a lot, especially because of what the ecosystem is, that those NFTs could gain over time.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think the concept behind the Ferro card is definitely interesting. Like you said, skirting around the securities laws is pretty important because that could really come to bite you in the butt. Whether you win a lawsuit against the SEC or not, like that could still be a really expensive lawsuit, like what Ripple just went through. They did win, so I don't know if the SEC is going to be going after any new ICO or tokens that had a pre-sale way back anytime soon. But still, that's like obviously a risk, and that costs them a lot. So I do like that approach that you're very cognizant of those laws.
Yeah, I mean, so long as we're able to, stay within the lines, we may as well. And it might seem a little odd to go this approach, but down the road, it's not a legal question at that point because the NFTs themselves have enough functionality to meet the legal requirements for us to be able to sell them now. It's a stupid system. We're the most litigious country on the planet in the history of mankind. And a lot of it is really dumb because it's designed by people who don't understand what they're regulating and legislating.
100% agreed. When you do come out with a token, do you have any plans on getting registered as an investment security, or is that just like kind of avoiding those laws altogether throughout the whole duration of your project?
So I can get into like the theoretical or philosophical side of this conversation. No, we're likely not. I believe our native token will just be a utility. Speculating in the future, I think that the most common sense approach for the SEC or regulators in various countries would be to have some sort of gradient system. So currently you'd have utilities, currencies, and securities. There's likely another category or two of token and coin out there that, we would come up with. And then some tokens would fall within gradients of that, so something might be a utility in a currency or a currency in a security. That's where I see it evolving in the future. And at that point, way down the road, I could see us being, pegged as a utility and currency, but not a security. There's no, we're not paying dividends to people. We're not guaranteeing returns on investment. We're not selling them before the ecosystem launches. All of the brands we work with will not launch a token until they already exist. Most of them, being large brands, do already exist and would have use cases. So that's something we're very aware of. We have a blockchain securities attorney as well that we've already retained. We've talked about this tons, and I expect in the future we will see. I don't know. It'll be an interesting next decade for the crypto space, as I think hopefully we get younger, more intelligent, more educated people in those positions.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that you guys have a blockchain specific attorney under retainer. I can't imagine that's cheap, but they hopefully will know what they're talking about and know the ins and outs.
He's great. He's actually, I think, this week speaking at another crypto event. He's like traveling all the time to be some keynote speaker somewhere, be part of a panel, this other thing. We're going to have an AMA at some point on our Discord with him, a general counsel, and two of our advisors who are attorneys as well. Because this whole conversation, this specific conversation, I feel is very, very important in the space, and how we view it. And I think we'll also be with that talking about our vision of how we'll be able to hold people accountable or hold brands and businesses or teams accountable within the Gauss ecosystem, which is something else that no other chain or project is really doing. Uniswap, I'd like to say that the team taking care of Uniswap cares about scams, because I know they do, but they don't care enough to pull a scam token off of their swap. You know what I mean? There's very, very little accountability in this space, and it's unfortunate. And that's something else we're looking forward to. Not looking forward to the legal battle, but to the ability to hold brands accountable and to hold, a higher standard in this space.
Yeah, definitely. That's an interesting topic because it's kind of like what's the word I'm looking, like a gradient. Like on one end you got how decentralized do you want to be and on the other end you got how organized or fraud resistant do you want to be.
You can say centralized.
That works too. Yeah, centralized or decentralized. And there's not really a great solution on both sides. So
Right, there's pros and cons to everything. In my,
exactly.
I think something as well, like the entire concept of decentralization, Web3, metaverse, these are all concepts that are going to continue to evolve and solidify over time. We all have individual and some small collective concepts of what those terms mean to us, but as an entire collective, they're still being defined. And I think, like, even though we're a centralized network, I think the idea of decentralization of revenue streams is very important and not often discussed, because that's a way that Gauss is going to be decentralized, right? That's part of what we're doing from the onset. We want to take marketing dollars from these brands, and rather than those dollars going to Facebook, Apple, Google, uh, they'd be going to consumers, direct to users. It's a $1 trillion market that's just going to those big FANG companies. And I think that like that and other areas of decentralization will become like more forward or more front facing in this whole conversation.
Yeah, exactly. There's like it's a matter of how centralized are you or how decentralized are you. It's not a yes or no question for most of the time.
Right. And how? Because again, decentralization just doesn't, it's not only one thing. It's not only having people run nodes in your ecosystem. I think the revenue sharing, I think governance is another important area of decentralization. There's a lot to it. And I'm interested to see how that evolves over time as well. And being part of that conversation and shaping it.
Yeah, me as well. It's definitely been taking place over the last year or two, especially in the blockchain space, and will continue taking place over the next decade or multiple decades. I guess we'll really see. Only time will tell. But yeah, we got a couple more questions coming in. Let's see. Sean Cal asks, will you have any kind of launch pad, for lack of a better term, for smaller projects or entertainers to use for interacting on your blockchain?
Yes, but I don't have an announcement date for when we expect to have that out. Because before we get that done, we need to have our processes, our vetting processes well developed before we're able to scale them down, right? Scaling up is a little easier, because that's just more brute force, especially when you're working with brands and whatnot. Like, we don't have to vet Pepsi, right? I'm not saying Pepsi is one that we've talked to, or Coke, even though Coke's here in Atlanta, it's their headquarters. But yes, is the short answer. We want to have a platform for smaller brands and projects that we can bring onto Gauss while maintaining the high integrity and high quality of the overall network. What that's going to look like is a big question, though. I can also say that we want to launch a gaming DAO, one that we have a hand in forming, but would be decentralized within Gauss, that would functionally oversee all of gaming within Gauss. So it would be, a community DAO. And in that, we would also have a grant for games, because that's another thing we want to focus on early, because getting games onto Gauss will take time. Some games are 12, 24 months in development. So working with them early is the best way for us to have quality games in the future.
Gotcha. That's super interesting. We did have a question that was, it was from Triton. He asked how it would integrate blockchain gaming into your ecosystem, but he took the words right out of my mouth. Or I guess I answered the question before I asked it.
I mean, there's more to it than that. If we wanted to go a bit deeper, I've mentioned a couple times what our plans are vaguely with NFTs. And I know that somebody asked that question earlier. But anyway, so our goal with NFTs is to have them resemble on-chain everything with in-game digital assets right now and more. Because way in the future, this could be 3, 5, or more years down the road. I want us to have, AI generative NFTs and in-game assets and things. I think that's where the future of that goes. And I also think tying this question into the why L1, L2, or why not somebody else's L1, part of what we're as well is, are you familiar with Cosmos?
Very vaguely. That's one of the chains that I haven't done a whole lot of research into.
So Cosmos has a layer 0, 1, and ecosystem of twos. And that's something else that we're going to be doing. We'll have our backbone layer 1. And then for, brand X, if they have a game that warrants its own blockchain, we'll be able to launch that as an L2 on Gauss. So it'll still be part of our ecosystem, interoperable with everything else, with our Omni pool when we get to that point. But it would be their own blockchain within Gauss. Right now, there's a small ecosystem of 3 other games that I've been working with, developing their tokenomics and some other things. But I really want to get them over to Gauss about this time next year, end of Q2, beginning of Q3. And they have some fairly significant partners. CyberKongs is one of their partners. So getting them over onto Gauss and giving their own blockchain for their ecosystem of games would make sense.
Gotcha. That's super interesting. I think that. Okay, now I'm really starting to see why creating your own L1 really makes sense, because you have opportunities like that. That definitely is exciting to think about. There's so many ways you can branch out from that.
Right. And again, in the future, when we get to a point that we want to evolve the entire ecosystem or the underlying blockchain architecture, we don't have to worry about what we're built on, because we're going to be ourselves. And I think, as an interesting note here, I think the idea of immutability in the blockchain space is an interesting one. Like the blockchain itself being an append-only immutable historical ledger is important. That is the foundational element that everything else is built on. However, smart contracts, tokens, blockchains themselves, like the architecture, shouldn't be immutable. Like, you wouldn't want a computer that didn't have an operating system that couldn't be upgraded, right? That wouldn't make sense. Why would you play a game that could never be upgraded? Those sorts of things don't make sense to me, which is another reason we want to do what we're doing the way we're doing it, is so we can grow this, for 3, 5, 10, 20 years.
Gotcha. Yeah, it definitely goes back to that saying, there's pros and cons to going both ways, right?
Right.
Definitely interesting to think about. Let's see. We got a couple questions about the NFTs again. One of the guys in chat asks, can we talk about the other 2 tiers of Ferro cards? And then also somebody asked about what are some expected benefits of the Gauss Gang Iron NFT?
Yeah, sure. So the 3 tiers are iron, nickel, and cobalt. Each one is basically double the allocation of the one before it. So nickel gets 2x what iron would typically. Cobalt would get 2x what nickel would typically. And their prices would likely reflect that same 2x. We don't have a date that we can say when we want to launch the sale for the others, because we want to get through this first tranche of iron tier. The next sales will likely be either entirely whitelisted from current iron NFT holders or mostly from iron tier NFT holders. So that's one current also benefit that the iron tier has. We'll be giving access to those future tiers. The cobalt, there's only going to be 2,345 of those. We're only selling 2,000. The other 345 are being used for promotional giveaway, that sort of thing. But we will likely limit those to 1 per person. So when we get to the point where we're doing the nickel sale, I want Gauss, I want our project, our community, everything to be at a point where they just sell out very rapidly. Same thing with the cobalt tier. So this is all very early community building, fundraising for us, all that stuff. Future benefits of these NFTs. Let's say that anyone in this chat, right? You start a business, you grow it to $1 billion, you want to launch a tokenized asset with Gauss, and you want to engage with our audience while bringing in your existing audience. Any conceivable way that you could come up with to engage with your audience, we will be prepared to handle that. That for right now, that looks like airdropping, claiming, giveaways, whitelist opportunities, or other opportunities. In the future, though, I think a lot of brands are going to find very interesting uses for these.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's. I think the NFTs, like I, mentioned a little bit before, are super interesting and how you guys were going about that. And yeah, I think it's a really good system, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out for you. But another question in chat is from Tilrelli. He asked, "Why are you going to be the one to succeed?" And this, I can kind of branch off on that question a little bit, because one question I kind of had thought of earlier back when we were talking was in the near term, at least, projects out there. I don't know if you've heard of 100 Days Ventures, but essentially they are integrating the business world with the crypto world in a similar fashion that you guys are, like helping them launch their token or NFT, whatever the case may be, on chain, except they just don't have their own blockchain. They're using smart contracts, NFT marketplace, and going that route. So in the short term, at least, is there a way that you guys would have an edge over a project like that?
Yeah, I think what we're building, the way we're building it, the entirety of the vetted ecosystem, the fact that we're building a curated ecosystem is a huge part of that selling point, especially for large brands. Because, if Coca-Cola launched on Polygon, 20 minutes later, there's going to be 20 other Coca-Cola tokens, and that won't happen with Gauss. Somebody might launch them on those other decentralized chains as well, but within the Gauss ecosystem, they will be the one only true token, right? There's not a question. So for their users, it would be very simple to bring on new people and say, just use this swap, just use this ecosystem. That is a trusted network for our brand. That's where we are. You don't have to worry about the scams and fraud and all that other crap. To answer another part of your question, why are we going to be successful and not somebody else? I think our team is a solid part of it. I think, moreover, however, timing. In 3 to 5 years, Gauss will exist, even if we weren't building it. I mean, it might be called something different, right? But a curated layer 1 ecosystem, like what we're building, would exist even if we're not building it. And that's because, in my opinion, it's the right time. I think Bill Gross had an amazing TED Talk he's the founder of Idea Labs. He had a great TED Talk about the one determining characteristic in success that he could measure across startups, and it was timing. He went and looked at tons of successes, failures, and everything in between, and timing was the most important aspect to, a success indicator. And I think Gauss wouldn't have worked if we launched it in 2018. The space was too small, so trying to build a niche within a niche wouldn't have worked at the time. It definitely wouldn't have worked when Ethereum first launched, or basically anything before 2018. Now it can work because enough big brands are looking to the space. They are trying to figure out ways to get into the space to capitalize on it. And I think in many ways to engage with their audience, which will help them more effectively, efficiently use their marketing dollars. And in many ways also create new marketing dollars, because that's something else we can do with their tokenomics and their branded token.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I think going back to our talk about handpicking the team, I think that really is going to set you apart from somebody like if I wanted to copy your guys' model and make my own chain, I would not have the team. And really, the team is the driving force of a project at that scale. So I think that that's definitely one big advantage that you guys have. And it's one thing that I like most about your your guys' chain. And I'm just really looking forward to it. It's definitely I like the concept a lot. So let's
Yeah, I think
say
there's. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to completely change topics. So go right ahead.
I was just going to make a note on the team thing that I don't think I've said before in this AMA, at least, that another thing that I think is important about our team is we have a solid vision and value alignment that I think you don't get from new people working together. We know what our strengths and flaws are. We know, like, they know me warts and all, right? And I think that's something that you only get with time. And I think that having that to start is a very strong position to start from. That's all I was going to add on about the team thing.
Oh yeah, 100%. But let's see. Sporkman asks, other than purchasing NFTs, how else are you looking for your early supporter base to help out?
Growing our community, but if they're asking like financially specifically, it is just the NFTs. But I mean, ask questions in our Discord. We're very, very active in our Discord, and while I'm able to be this engaged in our community, I want to answer every question that comes up in our Discord, and I think I've achieved that so far. I even went back in Cardinal, or not Cardinal, in the Obsidian's AMA after that and answered literally every single question that was asked in that AMA. I won't be able to do it during this one. That's a 5-hour investment.
Yeah.
But I mean, engage with us. If you're not sold on the project as well, I would say don't purchase the NFT unless you're 100% certain. Don't. Ask questions until you are ready. Always be curious, and that's with any project. But especially with ours, we are early in our community build. We want to engage with our community and in many ways have them help shape a lot of what we're doing as well. We've taken a ton of feedback and incorporated it in various things, contests, giveaways, how we might be releasing the next NFTs. The whitelist idea came from somebody in our community. So by all means, hop on our Discord and talk.
Yeah, it's amazing how many great ideas people have in the community.
Agreed.
It amazes me every day.
And that's what I mean. Like when people ask, like, well, what other uses are there going to be for branded tokens? I'm like, man, 2 years from now, there's going to be whatever brand, and they're going to come up with something that I'd never considered, which is amazing, right? But it also makes the early stages of this thing, like trying to draw on a whiteboard everything that could be done, challenging and difficult because there are endless possibilities. It's not a cop out, it's endless possibilities.
Yeah, definitely. I like all the possibilities. It is fun for me to think about because like I'm really in awe of how many different things you can do with blockchain technology and the intricate details. So it's really exciting to me to think about all the possibilities with this too.
Oh,
So
yeah. Like if you want to go off the rails in a like quick 2-3 minute thing, I really am looking forward to a lot of the future of blockchain tech and how it ties into our real world. Like you don't need a freaking license. You could literally give somebody an NFT at birth that is their, national identification carried with them through their whole life. Never have to re-register any of that crap. I mean, you have to go through licensing and whatnot, sure, but you could use it for voting. You could use it for taxes and government incentives. Like, imagine if we all had an NFT. Every person in the US had an NFT at the beginning of the pandemic, getting out that initial stimulus check would have been nothing. It would have been a simple smart contract. That's it. It could have been done in an afternoon. We have to bring a lot of our real world systems up into the 21st century instead of using these archaic 50, 100-year-old systems. So I'm looking forward to a lot of that as well.
Oh yeah, me too. And actually, speaking of different utilities using something like that big and broad at scale, do you have plans? Because I know you said that you were integrating or mainly targeting brands and like creators, but do you have plans to capture the brand of like the U.S. government or other government agencies for things like passports, birth certificates, driver's license?
I don't, I mean, Gauss will end up being a launch pad for us. Austin and I have built sky castles for hours about our future plans, what we want to do, both within Gauss, tied to Gauss, and separate from Gauss. Like I want to launch a world building as a service business, right? Literally a business that just builds worlds for whatever media you want, books, movies, games, whatever. Because I think that will be a functional business in the future. I also have another blockchain project that Austin and I have talked about that I don't want to say it's a clone of Gauss, but it's a very similar ecosystem with a slightly different application, bringing a current Web 2 entire ecosystem that's already regulated and bring it over into Web 3 because it should be. Yes is the short answer to that question. We do have future and big plans. Where those go, I don't know. It all depends within the trajectory of Gauss, right? If we take a similar trajectory to Chili's and Socios, their fifth quarter, they did $200 million in revenue. They were doing up to $2 billion a day in volume, and they're only doing sports fan tokens. So if we take even just a similar trajectory to that, then yes, we have very, very big plans, and we'll be developing a whole separate team just to help us launch various other plans.
Yeah, I like it. And I guess taking it down just a notch, let's say Nike were to approach you, not the US government, like a big brand like Nike that wanted to launch a token on your network versus somebody like, I don't know, a small YouTuber with like a million or 100,000, whatever subscribers. Like obviously there's a massive difference in size of brand there. How would that look in terms of treating Nike and how they would get launched versus a smaller creator?
So it will end up being a very boutique experience or bespoke experience for the large brands because they have the capital to do so, right? Initially, most of the partners that Gauss will have, we won't be charging them to launch with Gauss, right? We'll do all the tokenomics, smart contract development, everything for our initial partners. And some of those will even end up having deals that benefit those initial marquee partners more heavily. In the future, those services will come at a cost to large brands because they can pay for it. They can put $2 million into a budget to say, we want to do this. This is our plan for this. And then they might even take 10, 20% of their marketing dollars and buy up their token throughout the year to maintain a sustainable ecosystem. For smaller brands, unfortunately, it won't be as bespoke. It will not be, a whole team or multiple teams working on everything for a small brand because that's not scalable. It's not, I wish we could. It's just not something that we would be able to do. However, in developing a platform that they can go through and a process that they can go through that will vet them, basically a really, really solid plug and play or drag and drop system to develop their smart contract, tokenomics, everything else, and then go through, a review process with an account manager, and then the final third-party vetting for everything else, then yeah, it's going to seem arduous for a lot of smaller brands, unfortunately. But the quality that does come through would be there, in my opinion. Not every small brand wants to have their, economy verified. We have a partner that we're talking to, or a potential partner that we're talking to about handling that. We'd have our own in-house team, and they would have their business as part of what they do right now is tokenomic verification. A lot of that stuff just isn't a goal for many smaller projects. They don't care about it. Unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, because if you're developing tokenomics and not planning to have them last for 5-10 years, that is to me just a, make a quick buck scheme, unfortunately. And you can evolve them too, by the way. You can evolve your tokenomics over time. Like I said, they should not be immutable, but you still need to have solid plans in place so you don't have an Axie Infinity problem, right? Like that game made how much money? They're still going, but their tokenomics were trash out the gate. So
Yeah, I always find it funny when, especially back in like a node season and DAO season, when people were talking about their runways that they had on their tokenomics. It's like, oh yeah, I got my 6-month runway until we will have to figure out something else. And it's like, dude, you're only thinking 6 months ahead.
yeah, that's what I mean. It's really sad. Like that entire other ecosystem of project, hopefully within the next week or two, I'll be able to announce those projects that I've been working with. But I've been developing a system of economics for each of those games and the ecosystem as a whole that will be sustainable and be able to thrive across a very long timeline because it will be monitored and tweaked and updated quarterly. And that's only because at scale, doing things quarterly makes sense across 3 games or 6 games or whatever within their ecosystem. But I think the projects that don't do that, it's sad. It's a sad point to fail on.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think so many projects that launched were mostly just money making schemes for the founders. It's
Yeah.
essentially just like putting your chips. I'm stealing this analogy from Yabon because he's a YouTuber, but it's putting your chips in the middle of the table and you're playing, whatever game, Texas Hold'em or something. And at the end of the day, some people get more chips and some people get less. And that's essentially what a lot of these projects were. So I'm assuming that's one thing that you would look at in your vetting process is looking at the tokenomics and making sure it's not those Ponzonomics that we have seen so much in the past.
Well, yeah, like for us and our core team, we've gotten nothing basically thus far. Once we raise enough money, we'll be paying ourselves a small salary and whatnot, but we have our own share of the token vested over years after it launches. So we don't begin getting any of our own token until I think it's either a 4 or 6 month cliff. I'd have to go look, but that I'm not concerned with it because it is so far in the future for us and our team. Right? We don't start getting our tokens until mid-ish next year, and then we'll be getting them for years after. It's like equity because we're going to have equity vesting schedules as well. And I think that's a solid, indicator for teams. If you see that they're working on that longer timeline, like we have a whole separate, cap table and equity vesting schedule and all of those things, that's important. Treating your token similarly is also important, and it protects your community. And if you're not doing this for a community, like great example, a brand would want to launch with us but has no use case, only wants to monetize their community, has no intention of engaging them. Why would we launch them on Gauss? That doesn't make sense for us. And I don't think we do it. I really, really do not. And it's an interesting conversation because you're talking about potentially turning down not insignificant amounts of money, right? But how could we build this high integrity ecosystem if we weren't willing to make those calls, right? From the onset and really bake that into the foundational elements of what it is that we're building.
Yeah, definitely. I like that approach. Like I think that you guys have really taken a lot of what hasn't worked and really
Yeah.
put your spin on it so that it might actually work. I really like that.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate that you see scams happen every day. Like we had one reach out to us that apparently rug pulled recently, and I just don't get it. Like as a human being, I've never been able to understand that sort of short term view of making a quick buck, faking it till you make it. Like whatever, none of that stuff makes sense to me, right? Uh, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Let's see. I got just a couple other questions I want to ask. I know I want to be respectful of your time. We've already been going for an hour. Doesn't feel like it, but we have been. So with being in contact with a lot of real world brands and having them launch on your network, that's obviously going to put a lot of attention on you guys from people that aren't in the crypto space. So, do you have plans for making that kind of like a seamless transition for people that have never touched crypto before, that are just getting into Nike because they saw Nike was launching and they really wanted to get in on that? How
Yeah,
is that going to look?
that's an end game goal. I don't know how long that'll take to really get there because first you have to build the functional MVP, launch, begin building the ecosystem and the community, and then you're able to over time begin refining it. But in the future, and let's say 2 to 3 years, I think that we'll get to a point where blockchain bridges are more secure, cross chain interoperability is more seamless, and the end user experience begins to become cleaner, right? It's not going to be like 2 years and we're there, but it'll begin to mold and shape over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, to where we see Web 2 being right now. Like anyone who's old enough to remember the internet of the 90s, it was an atrocious experience. Like it was terrible. Every single fucking aspect of it was terrible. It was bad. Every way you could look at the internet back then in hindsight was just bad. But it got better over time. And that's exactly what the blockchain space will be and what we look forward to building as well. Like we would like to have one app that is our entire portal into the Gauss ecosystem. Picture something like a blockchain version of Steam, perhaps. Like that's a very seamless experience. I like Steam and I hate Steam, by the way. That's a whole different thing. Uh,
Yeah,
or that their Web 2 take rates are Web 3 opportunity. I think that's going to be more and more true. Steam takes like 30% or more of transactions. I don't think that'll survive the Web 3 transition. Anyway,
no, no, an NFT marketplace with 30% royalty probably won't make it.
yeah, that's what I mean. And that's part of the reason, by the way, we have the relationship with Sphere that we do. There's a lot of aspects to that partnership. Some ways that we're partners, some ways that we're clients of one another in different ways, and investors into one another's ecosystems, or purchasers rather into one another's ecosystems. But we want that competition within Gauss. That's why we want dystopia or whatever they decide to call it, another, a third party swap, because it'll help hold us accountable and hold us to a standard of what is best for our community, right? That level of competition is important, even in a centralized ecosystem, in my opinion.
For sure. And I suppose the last question I have is, what are the clear cut like revenue plan for the Gauss ecosystem and the Gauss token?
Yeah. So Our primary revenue stream is going to be transaction based. Again, going back to use Chili's and Socios as an example, their transaction fee is 0.2%. And at scale, that's a lot of money. When you're doing 2 billion in volume a day, 0.2% is a lot. We'll likely be launching with a slightly higher percentage, but nothing crazy, right? It might be 3, 5, or whatever percent. But we want to scale that down over time, not maintain some like 5 or whatever percent forever. That just doesn't make sense. And that is really the biggest chunk because, again, in just transactional revenue with not insignificant volume, you can build a very large multi-billion-dollar business. Beyond that, we will also have numerous other services that we offer, likely at a premium to large brands. Again, because they have the budgets for it and they want that sort of relationship where they're being catered to. Like you end up making after campaign wrap up videos, whole videos that are animated and everything else just to present how that $10 million campaign went. And all of that stuff will cost money. Maybe in the future, we'll be able to also offer them other services that we're going to need to do in-house. I think it would be worth us spinning off some blockchain legal and blockchain accounting services to our clients, because being able to offer them, entire packages of solutions makes sense. So there's a lot of opportunity, but mostly transactional.
Yeah, I think that's a huge opportunity for like even offering just like a full-blown marketing agency for projects just getting on your network. I think that would be a huge opportunity, especially for big brands that have the budget for that. I think that's another great way that you guys could monetize that.
Right. And on that, we'll be able to model that out as well. Say, this is what we expect. If you look at Machinations, that's the tokenomics verification partner that I was talking about. They have a tool, and using their tools as is or in the future, we can model out what those marketing campaigns would look like with different audience or consumer personas, right? So we can build their whole marketing campaign, say these are the incentives and mechanisms we expect, or the ones we're incorporating into this plan, and then model it out over 3 or 6 months to look at what that actual engagement looks like. Which is something else we want to do across our whole ecosystem. Basically, every token that ever gets launched in Gauss, we want to be able to model it all out so we can make a lot of predictions based on macroeconomic factors, market factors, anything outside and inside that we could potentially come up with or predict. We could see how our economy is going to react over 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years. That's something else that nobody else can do in any other like decentralized blockchain, and it doesn't seem like anyone wants to do that sort of thing at scale yet. But I think it'll be amazing for us to do that, being able to project out in extreme timelines, based on any number of stochastically modeled factors that we say X, Y, and Z might happen or might change or whatever, and then look at it in 2 years. Like, we expect a recession to happen July of 2022, what is that going to look like? And this, you can do that years in advance.
Yeah, like I said, the possibilities are seemingly endless. It's exciting to think about, but
yeah, and I think building it all from this point, though, the right way is the best way to do it. Like, we could go raise money right now from venture capital with where we're at. We'd end up giving up more than I'd be comfortable with for not sufficient amount of money. But we could. Like, that's, even in this market, that's still not entirely difficult, especially building what we're building with what we've already built, all that stuff. Building it slow, bootstrapping for the first year and change, slowly building our community, slowly rolling out this initial sale, all of these things, in my opinion, are still the right way to do it. Because once we get to a point where, let's say we launch or announce our first marquee partner, there will become a point shortly thereafter where we're functionally drinking from a fire hose. You know, it won't be turning on a spigot, because once you get one or two marquee partners, everyone else comes. That's the way that works with just about anything.
Yep.
So I think, pouring this foundation right, letting it set, doing it all over time, doing it a little slow is the best way. I'm a big fan of the move fast, break things idea, but when you're launching a layer one blockchain, there's a lot that has to be done right.
Yeah, hopefully you don't break your own blockchain.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got one last question I wanted to ask that was from the chat. So AJB says, dumb this crap down. How are you going to generate revenue? Give me a sample of X company that you might onboard. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And then how much money do you plan on making from that?
Okay, so Brand X launches on Gauss. Their token within 12 months becomes worth, 100 million market cap. Part of their cut would be maybe 20% of their own token. Part of our cut would also be a percentage of their token, plus what we're putting into liquidity. The portion of their token that we hold, we will just forever keep on a balance sheet, because you're able to leverage significant assets with debt at large scale. Anyway, when Brand X begins trading, we might make 1% of every transaction. And if they have 100 million market cap, they're a very active brand, which I think is a small goal, by the way. 100 million for any large brand, that's an achievable goal. Anyway, 1% of a 200 million per day volume on 100 million token, there'd be a very active volume, but common to what you see with others. That's 2 million a day revenue off 1%. And I mean, that gets broken into a couple different things because we have our reflections and various pools, but regardless, that's 2 million revenue per day off that number. Now, if you expand that or extrapolate it out across 200 or more similar sized tokens launching in our ecosystem per year, even if that low number is all we do, I think the math makes sense. If we made only 1% off of $100 million tokens 5 years from now, then this business model makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I like that you're able to explain it very simply, as well as, explain it very in depth.
I'm not a great I'm not great with being concise or brevity. I'm very long-winded. But doing this again and again and again and answering the same questions time and again, you get better at it. And hopefully that answered his question well enough.
Yeah, I think it did. But yeah, I mean, repetition, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
But I had a thought when you're answering that question. I was like, what if there was like a Gauss Gang reality TV show similar to like Shark Tank, where you get like 5 different projects that want to pitch something, and you like bid on the launch pad pricing or fee that you take from them based off of how cool it is and how much revenue it might generate from the transactional volume or something like that. I don't know. Just a random thought I had.
We can call them meta sharks and we'll do it all in VR.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I appreciate this. There was one other question I wanted to answer, and it was because I think you or somebody else from the Cardinal team had asked it before the AMA started.
Yeah.
Wizard thing.
Oh, yeah. That was going to be my last question.
So I'll answer that and then wrap up, I guess. But the wizard thing started because of that other ecosystem of projects that I've been working with. They started calling me the tokenomics wizard, and it kind of took on a life of its own, and I have just adopted it. I have owned it. I use it on my Twitter profile now. It's like in every Discord server I'm part of, I put it there. In role playing, I like wizards. That's one of my go-to, caster classes are my thing, and MMOs and role playing. So that's the short version of the wizard story. The numbers wizard.
Gotcha. All right. Every time I see a little wizard emote, I'm gonna think of Gauss Gang, but I just don't know when the hell I'm gonna see another wizard emote. But hey,
They should be all over our Discord if you ever come visit.
that's that's very true. I've gone over there a few times, and it's just like wizard after wizard.
Yeah. Um, in wrapping up the Ferro cards, for anyone who hasn't heard of them before, and I see a lot of the names in here I recognize, but they're $110. You can go to our Discord links or go to Gauss Gang. Just click on a Ferro card link up top and then go through the process. It's actually been one of the smoothest NFT minting processes. We partnered with Nifty Kit to launch this. We made the last second change. Felt bad for Austin. He wrote up a bunch of custom smart contracts for our NFT launch, but we decided to pivot at the last moment because it was a better end user experience and better for us as well. So, yeah, looking for questions in our Discord. And thank you so much for having us, Zach.
Yeah, for sure. It was a pleasure having you guys on. And actually, before we go, we do have one of those Ferro card NFTs to give away. So
Yes, we do.
I'm gonna go back in the chat and pick my favorite question, or unless you would like to as well, that's totally okay.
Nope, your house. You pick.
All right. But as far as collecting information, would you like me to send them over to the Goth server, or should I collect their wallet address and just DM it to you directly?
Yeah, if you can just collect it and then DM us or DM me, that'd be great.
Perfect. Well, hey, again, I appreciate it. This is a phenomenal project to hear about. I mean, you guys really seem to know your stuff, so it's definitely refreshing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. We're looking forward to having our first whole team AMA pretty soon, within the next 2 to 4 weeks. I say pretty soon, but next 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how all the schedules line up on our Discord, and then a bunch of big ones thereafter. Oh, one last thing. You brought up Nike earlier.
Yeah.
We're not in talks with Nike, but the agency that we're working with that's running all of our marketing, they're actually on set for a Nike commercial right now. I posted
okay.
this morning because I didn't know he was working with Nike right now. He's worked with lots of other big brands, but or they have. But I just thought it was interesting that you randomly said Nike, and I was like, "Hey, Jensen and Jensen's actually working on Nike right now."
Oh, and that's awesome. Hopefully, there's a connection that can be made there. That could be huge.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what we're going to be doing as our other part of the go-to-market strategy is tapping into marketing and talent agencies to, they will market to their clients our services and our platform. So.
Gotcha. I like it.
Anyway, thank you and so much for your time, Zach. Thank you to the rest of the Cardinal House community for having us here. If you have more questions, feel free to head over to our Discord and ask them.
For sure. Yeah, I'll put a link to your guys' Discord in the AMA questions chat. But again, thank you everybody for tuning in. We had a great turnout, and again, thank you for your time.
Yep.
So I hope everybody has
talking with you guys again.
Yeah. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
All right. Have a good one, Zach.
You too.